Welcome to lesson 11, Virgil's Aeneid. And you guys read, I think, the key passages of it. And one of the reasons I wanted to include it is some people reappear that we know about, one of whom is Priam. So we remember Priam from the Iliad, mourning over his son Hector. And here, Priam gets killed by a rampaging Greek. And you see, as the Iliad is told from the Greek point of view, here we're getting the Trojan point of view, and you feel sorry for the Trojans. They're getting slaughtered and their cities getting destroyed. But one of the things I noticed is that they seem to be making a lot of excuses for the fact that Aeneas basically ran away. Right? He didn't stay and die with his city, but he ran away. And he ran away and he created Rome. And so therefore his running away is justified because you created this great empire because he ran away. And I guess he took with him the images of the gods in the temples, which also gives him an excuse. Oh, I was saving the images from the temples. The fact is, 4 different ghosts come to him and tell him, oh, run away. You're destined to found an empire, which again strikes me as somewhat convenient for Aeneas, because who could prove or disprove that a ghost told him this? It's almost like a religious thing. But remember, this is being written during the Roman Empire, shortly after it's become an empire, under Augustus, who's really the first true emperor. So basically, it's kind of justifying, I don't know if you could say it's justifying the transition from republic to empire, but it's definitely justifying Roman destiny, repurposing, as someone might say, the Greek myths for their own advantage. So let's just talk about this Trojan horse business. And this is a good example of what I call the Virgilian or the Virgilian style, where he talks about the snakes attacking Laocoon. All right, so that's a pretty intense scene. Like, of all the descriptive passages we've read so far, that's one of maybe the most energy is devoted to describing thing by thing by thing. So it's just loaded up with specific details. Here's all these verbs like rearing, breasting, plunging, surging, thrashing, rolling, churning, foaming, flickering, hissing, right? So that's a lot of stuff. That's a lot of, like, that's just a pretty violent thing. But I think one of the reasons it's effective, just to point out good writing, is that it just kind of piles on without giving you a chance to stop. Like, you almost feel like you're being attacked by the language, right? It doesn't give you a chance. Like, wherever you turn, there's another verb that's twisting around you. So I think if you're writing an action scene and you don't want to give people time to think, that's a very effective technique. So now I think that one of the things that was interesting is that Laocoon, he had it right. Like, he was actually right, and yet he got killed by these snakes, and the people took that as an omen. But the idea of someone warning about something and not being believed is unfortunately something that sometimes happens. And my sympathies always go out to that person who's not believed. Now let's talk about, there was that scene where Aeneas sees Helen of Troy. That struck me as kind of an interesting scene, because he's thinking that he's going to punish Helen of Troy, whether by killing her or whatever, because he's really angry at her, he blames her. And how does Aeneas's mother counsel him? What does she tell him about his hatred for Helen? It's not that beauty Helen you should hate, nor the man that abducted her. No, hate the gods, the ruthless gods who tear down the wealth of Troy. So that's there's a saying, don't hate the player, hate the game. Don't hate the sinner, hate the sin or the system of sin. Now let's talk about one thing about Dido. This scene is very short, and I don't know why this scene was so famous in antiquity, because they don't really say anything except they go into this cave, and I guess they have a romantic interlude in there. And then after that, Dido thinks that they're married, but Aeneas says they aren't. But for some reason, in classical antiquity, like St. Augustine, who we'll get to, they thought this scene was the raciest, most risque. They thought it was a very daring scene that they even like talked about these two people together making out in a cave. And also, I guess it happens in life that sometimes two people get together and one thinks it means something more than it means to the other person. So after Dido felt like she kind of got dumped by Aeneas, she killed herself. And so he feels very guilty about that, obviously, because then in the land of the dead, he comes across her, but she's just not there. Like she doesn't want anything to do with him. There's a saying, hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. So Dido felt like she was very scorned. And so even in the afterlife, she's still not even forgiving Aeneas, which just shows the power of some of these emotions. Let's go to the Golden Bough, which is some kind of symbol. And there's actually a book called The Golden Bough by a guy named James Fraser, taking this as a metaphor for a whole system of analyzing the psychological importance of myth. And the Jung, C.G. Jung, the psychologist, was inspired by this to write a lot about myths and their meaning. And then based on that, Joseph Campbell adapted Jung. So it's sort of like Joseph Campbell adapting Jung, adapting Fraser, adapting this thing of the Golden Bough. So Sybil says to him that no one can pass below the secret places of the earth before he plucks the golden foliage off that tree. Freely, easily, all by itself it comes away, if fate calls you on. If not, no strength within you can overpower it. No iron blade can tear it off. Does that remind anybody of anything other from myth? And I think also with Theseus, I think in other versions of the myth than the one we read, they said only the true hero will be able to move the boulder off and take the sword out from under the stone. But it's the same idea that if you're meant to do it, if fate calls you on, it'll come easily. And if not, then nothing will allow it. So that was definitely used by whoever created the King Arthur story. They kind of copied that idea in pulling Excalibur from the stone. 2 or 3 paragraphs down, it says, then 2 white doves land on the grass. This is a very early example of what Joseph Campbell calls magical aid. And if you listen to his lectures, he says very, very often in fairy tales or in some kind of adventure, the hero is led toward his destiny or led onto the special world by magical helpers, very often animals. So birds or rabbits or some kind of little creatures will very often lead the hero toward where he wants to go. And that's a kind of a symbol of nature cooperating with the hero. So 2 white doves land on the grass at his feet. He stops, watching keenly. What sign will they offer? Where will they lead? On they fly, pausing to feed, then flying on as far as his eye can track them. Up they veer quickly to settle atop a glittering tree. So as we go forward and as you read forward for the rest of your lives, as you read great literature and myths and adventure stories, always look out for helpful little animals who are helping the hero. And if they're not animals, they might be helpful little people. So sometimes there's little people you meet on your way who give you a clue, or creatures in the Star Wars cantina. In R2-D2 is in a way a helpful little creature. He carries a little message within him. So where else? This idea, a crowd of dead streamed toward him, thick as leaves in autumn woods. We didn't read this part in Homer, but there's a very famous line in Homer that says that men are as generations of leaves falling from trees, so are the generations of men. The idea is that like one generation dies, and another one takes its place, grows on the tree, and then they fall off the tree, and then it comes around, then more leaves grow, and then they fall off the tree forever and ever and ever. So when Virgil is saying, a crowd of dead streamed toward Aeneas, thick as leaves in autumn woods, he's definitely channeling Homer there. Aeneas asks his father, why are these people who are trying to get life again, why do they want life so much? And this again kind of goes to, remember when Achilles was in the underworld and he said, I'd rather be the lowest guy on earth than the king of the dead. And I guess there's this river of forgetting that they dunk these souls in, and then they forget what happened to them and they send them back up to live again if they didn't purge their sin. And then his father says, I'll tell you why all these people want to live. And then this whole page is full of interesting quotes and ideas. But he talks about how the body just wants to keep living and living and living, but the souls must pay for their body's old offenses. So there are these different punishments. Some get their crimes scorched away by fire. And then there's this line that I just love, and I think you'll find this in every hero. It said, and so I would underline this line and star it. Each of us must suffer his own demanding ghost. And what that means is that every one of us has some kind of cross we bear, or some kind of scar, or some kind of demon, or some kind of something. If you're an older sibling, you think the younger one gets all the babying attention. If you're the younger sibling, you think the older one. If it's not something, it's another thing. So every person has their own stuff that they have to work through in order to become a worked out, whole, healthy person. Because we all kind of pick up rust along the way, then it has to get burnished off. So everyone has something that they have to purge. And usually, if it's the hero in a story, part of the story is about him kind of dealing with his demanding ghosts. And especially as we move further forward in time, that stories become more and more about the psychology of the hero dealing with his ghost. And I think Harry Potter, it's the ghost of his parents. He's got this thing like Voldemort killed his parents, and he's got this scar that kind of represents his ghost or the thing he has to overcome. For Ron, maybe his ghost is his family's poverty, right? It's something that kind of haunts him in the story. And I think with Hermione, maybe it's her parents are muggles, so that's kind of a ghost. So sometimes a ghost is something you inherit. So anyway, these people have to kind of exercise their ghosts, and sometimes they have to turn the wheel of time for 1,000 years with a bunch of other people. Okay, so let's just set that aside. And remember, each of us must suffer his own demanding ghost. And if you're designing a character in a story, it's helpful to give them a ghost and design the story for them to overcome that. In Stranger Things, part of the way 11 overcame the ghost of her parentage and orphanage was to meet her shadow self and then kind of see the wrong way of dealing with that ghost because they shared a similar ghost or the same kind of ghost situation. And then as part of that journey, she learned better how to deal with the ghost of her own parent mystery. Okay, so we're just going to end up by talking about the messaging which is delivered to Aeneas to found Rome. He says, after Romulus founds our city, watch, my son, our city will extend her empire far and wide as the earth. And then it ends with saying, you, Roman, remember, rule with all your power the peoples of the earth. These will become your arts. Put your stamp on the works and ways of peace. Spare the defeated, break the proud in war. Those are very famous lines. So you're supposed to show mercy to the ones you defeat, but the proud you're supposed to break down, like people who are arrogant. But then there's this weird note at the end, and that's how Aeneas gets back out of the underworld. Because remember, Sybil tells him, oh, the descent to the underworld, that's easy. Night and day, the gates of shadowy death stand open wide. But to retrace your steps, to climb back out of hell, there the struggle, there the labor lies. Now, that's very Joseph Campbell, too, because Campbell's point is that on the hero's journey, the way back is extremely difficult because a lot of times you're different and the world you're coming back to has stayed the same. And so you don't really fit your old world anymore. And Joseph Campbell says it's like putting on a wet bathing suit. And the Sybil seems to be saying the same thing. Getting out of the underworld is hard. Only a few have done it, sons of the gods, borne back by their own excellence. So again, this idea which goes back to Homer of how excellent it is to do something that no one's done before or very few have done before. But then it's quite a mystery to me because it doesn't seem to really track with what was set up. What we were told is that it's so hard to get out of the underworld. The father escorts his son and Sybil out through the ivory gate. So is the Sybil wrong or what? So to me, that could be a flaw in the work, in the composition of the work, and maybe that's one of the reasons why, although Virgil is considered a great author and Aeneid is considered a great book, it's considered inferior to the Iliad and the Odyssey. It's not in the same class. But the writing, I think, is quite good on the sentence level. It's very colorful compared to a lot of the stuff we read.